What on earth is this thing? Who is it for? What does it cost? And should you buy one? Stay tuned and you'll find out. This is the Chery Omoda 5, a new small SUV from the Chinese brand that's making its re-entry into the Australian market after a, let's say, not fantastic first attempt. It's got low pricing and it's got a long warranty, just like other Chinese brands, MG and GWM have all. So, does this thing do anything differently to stand out from those other rivals? And should you buy one? I'm going to tell you in this review. Please do hit like and subscribe, and also hit the bell icon so you can keep up to date with all of my video reviews, aiming for 2 a week. Thanks. The Omoda 5 is a small SUV and it is pretty aggressively priced compared to some other small SUVs out there. The entry-level model is called the BX. It comes in at just under $30,000 before on-road cost, and it comes as standard with things like 18-inch alloy wheels, LED lighting. It's also got keyless entry and push-button start, a big 10.25-inch touchscreen media system, and rear seat air vents. And then there's this one, which is called the EX. It's the high spec version. It adds $3,000 to the price and adds a few extras as well, including the red exterior highlights. It's got red brake calipers as well. It's also got a sunroof, and it's also got heated seats in the front and a heated steering wheel. Plus, both front seats are electrically adjustable, whereas in the base model, only the driver's seat is. So it does seem to make a fair bit of sense in terms of value for money. If you're considering a very cheap SUV like the Chery Omoda 5, then you're probably also considering something like the GWM Haval Jolion. Now, hit my link at the top of the screen there and you'll see why I don't think that's one of the best alternatives to this car. In fact, one of the best alternatives to the Chery Omoda 5 is actually the Volkswagen T-Cross. It comes in at very similar money in terms of what you're paying for it drive away, for the entry-level version at least, and you're getting a Volkswagen. That's pretty appealing, right? It's got a very compact footprint, it's got a practical cabin, a sliding second row seat, which makes life a lot easier if you are juggling between passengers and parcels, and it is just a really, really good little SUV to drive, much better than this thing. The other alternative, which I think you should probably be looking at, is the Toyota Yaris Cross. Now, it's a small SUV with the choice of petrol and hybrid, and while it isn't the most refined car out there and doesn't feel the most luxurious, doesn't have as much flair and fun factor as the Omoda 5, I think it's going to be a better car to live with long term. The Chery Omoda 5 is 4.4 meters long, which puts it in that sweet spot zone for a lot of small SUVs. Not too big on the outside and not intimidating when it comes to parking spots, for example. I like the design of it in some aspects. I think it's got a very interesting front end look, but also I'm not a huge fan of the red on this EX grade. And at the back, I'm seeing a whole lot of Lexus influence. Tell me what you think though. It also kind of looks like an elephant has sat down on the back of it and squashed it. And there's also a little bit of evidence of such because there's a bit of a dent or a ripple in the roofline of this car. And just look at how flexible that is. That doesn't seem great to me. It does have a neat trick. So I've got the key here in my pocket, the car's locked. I don't have to walk up and touch the door or touch the handle or anything, it just unlocks for you. That's pretty neat, and if you're a parent and you've always got your arms full, that will be handy. One thing I just want to call out, the exposed metal pressing points. So you don't often see that kind of exposure. That in combination with the ripple on the roof, yeah, questionable. Now, let's check out the boot. If you choose the EX grade, which is this one, you get an electric tailgate, but the base model just gets a manual one. Now, there's a pretty decent sized boot. For a small SUV, you'll see the figures on your screen now. I think that's pretty manageable in terms of the luggage capacity. It isn't massive, but it's not tiny either. And underneath the boot floor, you'll also find a little storage tray, which you might be able to put wet clothes, maybe swimmers or something like that. And that's quite a large foamy bit. There's a space saver spare wheel under there too. So it does have some pretty nice things going on at the backside. If you haven't sat in a new car for a while and you jump into the Chery Omoda 5, you're going to feel like you've jumped into the future because it does have a very modern but also modern generic interior finish, because it is definitely all about screen size and the width of the screens across the dashboard as well. It's got the same thing that you see in a lot of brands these days, this piano black treatment as well. It's got a flat bottom steering wheel, it's got comfortable seats, so it is definitely going to make you think, wow, all this for this much money? There are some usability concerns though in terms of the piano black section here. So I like to pride myself on having very clean fingertips, but no matter what, I always feel like I've got the filthiest fingertips in the world, because this thing just shows up fingerprints so badly. You're going to want to have a little cloth that you keep in the car just to wipe it down every time you touch it. And you will touch it quite a bit, because that's where your air conditioning, fan controls, climate controls are as well. You don't have to go through the screen, thankfully, to control those elements of the car. And I think that's a big advantage over something like Haval Jolyon, for instance. So there's also another digital screen in front of the driver. Both the entry level and the top spec get these digital screens, so that's pretty nice to know. In terms of the materials, it is pretty well finished, at least in terms of perceived quality. You've got this finish on the seats, which isn't leather and isn't supposed to be, but it does imitate leather quite well. There's a leatherish style steering wheel cover as well. There's a nice soft plastic on top of the dashboard. There's hard bits on top of the doors. Doesn't really matter. At least there's a soft bit for your elbow. And I like the copper theme that sort of runs around the doors as well and onto the seats. It does look and feel and present pretty well. And in terms of storage, it's pretty good too. You've got a couple of cup holders here. You've got a little center storage bin. Actually, that's a pretty big center storage bin. You've got this big tray underneath here as well, and another tray up here with wireless phone charging, which is very neat. It's very Tesla-esque, in fact. There's two things that I wanted to finally call out on the interior of this car. So it does have reach and rake adjustment, which the Haval Jolyon doesn't have. So you can get a more comfortable position in this car than you can in a Jolyon. This isn't a Jolyon comparison, but you know, these little things are priced very close together. And yeah, it does have the single pane sunroof. There's no panoramic roof, but you do feel like you're very close to the ceiling. You know, I'm 6 foot tall, 182 centimeters, and I wouldn't want to go over a really big bump too fast because I might hit the ceiling. If you're tall, taller than me, you might find it a little bit cramped. Now, let's check out the back seat. This is a small SUV and it does feel a little bit tight in terms of back seat space, but it's not the worst in the class by any stretch of the imagination. This seat's set for my height. I've got enough knee room and just enough toe room, but there is this weird seam that runs through the floor pan of this car right where your toes would sit, so you sort of almost have to have them back here, which means your knees are up a bit more and it's not quite as comfortable. Headroom is a little bit tight as well. Anyone taller than me, like I said, 6 foot, would struggle, I think, for headroom, and getting in and out, you have to also duck your head a little bit if you are taller. If you have children and that's not a concern for you, you've got ISOFIX points in the window seats and 3 top tether points, and you could fit 2 child seats in here pretty comfortably. You won't fit 3. In terms of adult occupant space, you'll fit 2 comfortably, but not 3. So just keep that in mind. It's better considered maybe a 4-seater, unless you've got really small people that you're taking with you. There's a flip down armrest with a pair of cup holders. You get rear seat directional air vents, which is nice to see, and also a little USB charge port there. So everyone should be pretty happy. Oh, there's bottle holders in the doors. Didn't say they were bottle holders in the front doors either. Oh, one other thing I wanted to call out, you can also see what's happening in the back seat from the mirror a little bit. It's got this weird wide angle lens, which is trippy when you're driving. It's weird. It's the weirdest rear view mirror that I've ever encountered. Under the bonnet of the Omoda 5 at launch is a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder turbo petrol engine. It comes with a CVT automatic transmission and it is front wheel drive only. There will be an all-wheel drive version later on, but it'll get a bigger engine as well. There's a 1.6 litre turbo petrol engine with a 7-speed dual clutch automatic, available with front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, but we can't tell you the pricing for that one yet. It's going to be called the EX Plus, and don't know when it's arriving. Probably be sometime later in 2023 with maybe a $3,000 or $4,000 price premium. Look, there are some things that could be better about this car in terms of the way it drives, but I don't think it's as offensive as some of the other really cheap cars out there. And that is to say that there are some elements that I like to a degree. I don't mind the ride. I think it's okay. These are 18-inch wheels, remember, and you know, it's a pretty small car with a short wheelbase, so it's not necessarily going to be the most plush riding thing just naturally, but yeah, it's okay. What I'm not so fond of is the steering, because it is really quite strange. It's quite slow in terms of the action, so you actually have to turn a lot to make it turn the car a little. Lots of cars these days have much more direct action, so you know, you just think about where you're going and it turns, whereas this car, you actually need to turn the wheel quite a bit. It's a big steering wheel too for a little car. Let's talk about the powertrain then. So it's a CVT automatic on the back of a turbocharged engine, and in some cases it can be okay, but other times if you're in slow moving traffic or you're just taking away from a standstill, you will notice that the CVT is laggy and slow to react, and then it might sort of spool up, and what I mean by that is the engine will go and then it'll sort of die off away, and it can make it feel like it's sluggish from a standstill, despite the fact that it is a little turbocharged engine. So let's say you're at a traffic lights on a slope, I'm simulating it at the moment, and you take off, you get a surge of grunt, and then the CVT sort of loses itself, and then it feels like you're laboring the engine and transmission a little bit. Just put it into sport mode and it does, well, instantly feel a lot more urgent, which is good. I would probably leave it in sport mode most of the time because I actually think it makes the drive experience a bit more livable. But the other thing about that is I constantly seem to be accidentally putting it into manual mode when I get into the car and start driving, and then it's revving its ass off and I'm in first gear and I'm wondering, oh, I've done it again. Anyway, that could be better. Hey guys, I figured out what was going on with the gear selector. In normal gear shifters, this button actually actuates the leverage of the shifter, but in this car, that's the manual button. So you have to put it back in park and then you just have to slide it down to put it into drive. It's annoying. The other thing I wanted to call out is that the brake pedal feel is quite squishy in this car. So it just means that you might have to put your foot harder down to the floor than you expect. Boiling. This car gets so hot. I don't know whether it's something it's made of or what, but my God, it gets so hot in here. We should talk about active safety technology. Just like most cars these days, there is an element of intervention and annoyance when it comes to the active safety tech in this car. And lots of these technologies are designed to be safer for the user, but they can also really distract and detract from the drive experience. So the active lane keeping assistance when the cruise control's operating in this car, for instance, is really pushy and can be a little bit scary at times. I haven't liked it one bit, so I haven't been using cruise control. And then there's also this little driver eyesight monitoring camera in front of the steering wheel, which is constantly looking at your eyes to make sure that you aren't too distracted. And if it thinks you're distracted, it'll distract you by giving you a warning that you're distracted. Stupid technology. It's a small SUV, so does it have a small combined cycle fuel consumption figure? Well, it's thereabouts for the small SUV segment at 6.9 litres per 100 k's, but it's also not the most efficient little engine. In my real world testing with this car across a few hundred kilometres of driving, highway, urban and suburban stuff, you'll see the figure on your screen now for what I achieved. I think that's okay, but definitely not amazing. The Chery Omoda 5 has managed a 5-star Euro NCAP rating against the 2022 criteria, so you can rest assured that this car has all the safety technology to keep you safe. In theory at least. It has things like autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian, junction and cyclist detection. There's also lane keeping assistance with active lane keeping technology, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and a rear AEB system which will brake for pedestrians. And if you're a parent, you will appreciate that technology in particular. And then there's also airbag coverage inside the car with dual front side, full length curtain, and a front center airbag. Chery needs to stand out in the market as a challenger brand, and the ownership aspect of this car does seem pretty promising, at least on paper. It's got a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty, just like GWM Haval offers, and also Kia and SsangYong too. So it is, I mean, pretty good. There's also 7 years of roadside assistance included for free, plus a 7-year cap price servicing plan. You'll see the service intervals and the pricing on your screen now, and let us know what you think in the comment section below. To me, the Chery Omoda 5 kind of reminds me of one of those Android smartphones that isn't the Samsung, isn't a Google. It's just one of those cheaper ones that doesn't do everything as well as it could. It's got a lot of tech, just needs some fine tuning. Sums up this car pretty well, I think. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. And also, if you haven't already, please do hit like and subscribe and the bell icon to keep up to date with everything I'm doing. Thanks.